Hello and welcome to the Metapod, the Pokemon TCG podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. It's a new day, Sean, new week, and you know what? Last week, there was so much exciting stuff, including the first ever official Pokemon Regional Championships since the pandemic.
Yeah, the first one in 2 years. I
Yeah.
think the last one before that, was it also in Australia?
I'm pretty sure it was also in Australia.
It was Oceania. Yeah, international. So, yeah, Australia getting both the last and the first here. Oh,
Just
so
getting
lucky.
a ton of love. And although there was no stream, unfortunately there was no stream, it did feel nice because I just want to give a quick shout out to Mitch over at the Sableyes. He basically vined the entire event in terms of, giving updates on what were at the top tables, how he was doing personally, and kind of like the meta game at that point. Because, it was a little bit hard to get information. If you've seen information and stuff from the regional, it's only top 16 results that you can really find. There's no metagame pie chart or whatever like that. So big shout outs to Mitch from the Sableyes, a good YouTuber that Sean and I both really like. But we'll talk more about at least the top 16 and stuff later. But we got a bunch of news to, well, not really a bunch of news, just some news that I want to talk about and mention before we get into Brisbane regional results, including some free stuff that you get. But Sean, do you know what you can do for free?
Is it right? Leave a 5-star review for the Metapod on either Spotify or Apple.
Can. If you are on Spotify, you can leave a rating for free. Just a simple click of a couple buttons. Let us know how we're doing on the podcast to give us the most accurate rating. And then if you're on Apple as well, or even in the YouTube comments, you can leave a review about how the podcast is. You can verbally tell us how we're doing. Is that a phrase? Anyways, Sean,
verbally tell us is it would be spoken. I don't think there's audio reviews. That would be wild.
But what is it?
On Spotify or Apple?
Well, on Apple and YouTube comments, when you're typing.
Written. It's a typed review. It is
Well, that doesn't sound as cool as verbally.
Well, but it's not verbal.
Anyway, this 5-star review, because we read our reviews here on the podcast, this 5-star review from Apple Podcasts is 5 Starmies.
That's title. Good. That's good.
From Ludovician. I probably said that wrong. There's probably a reference that I don't understand. My apologies. But 5 Starmies, love the podcast. Always a lot going on and down with the TCG. Super nice to have this one-stop shop for all the happenings. Like many others, the pandemic got me back into the game, and I really appreciate the useful information in an entertaining format. 5 out of 5 Starmies. Thank you so much, my friend, for the lovely review. We've gotten so many people. I don't know if podcasts have also spiked during the pandemic, because I feel like when the pandemic first dropped, podcasts were down, and then they've slowly gotten back up as people are going more back to work and going outside, touching grass,
Yeah. As somebody who was in the industry when the pandemic happened, yes, podcast listenership was down quite a lot at the beginning of the pandemic because there was no commuting, which is where people listen to podcasts. So definitely there's been a re-uptick back to normal. I don't think that it's gone to a new high, if you will, probably.
Yeah, there's so many more people now that work from home. And they permanently work from home, or they're just still working from home type of deal.
But great listening to podcasts when you're doing the laundry, when you're cleaning the house. That's what I do. So
I also do that, Sean. We are the exclusive group of dedicated podcast listeners.
That's right.
But just a couple things before we get into the regional news. We're not going to do too much covering of this. We'll get into this later when the actual set list releases. But we did get information over in the Next Japan set that there's going to be more VMAXs. Now, if you pay attention, The last two Japanese sets, Starbirth and Battle Region, both did not include V Maxes. So we thought in 2022, that's this year, yes. 2022, oh yeah, V Maxes are dead. We're gonna be great. We're so close to just V Stars. Pokemon was like, psych.
Got them. I assume they'll be in whatever will it be in our Astral Radiance set maybe, or do you think it'll be the set after that even at this point?
I don't know actually what set it'll be in for us.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's gonna be in the next Japanese set, but I'm not sure which one it'll be in for us off the top of my head.
I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm trying to do the math.
Be Astral Radiance.
I would think so.
Astral Radiance.
I would think I would hope it's in our next set. The reason being is, or maybe it'll be in like the Pokemon Go set. I don't know, because that's a whole set that we don't know anything about. But I doubt it. But who knows? Who knows?
Thinking of the Pokemon because they said it was Deoxys and Zeraora that are going to be those Pokemon on as VMAXs, and I'm thinking, and I'm like.
Yeah, probably
and plus,
not.
They said like they're going to be Vs, V Stars, and V Maxes,
which is wild.
I don't know if all of that would be included in the Pokemon Go set. So I feel like it'd be Astral Radiance.
I agree. My brain goes to like, when is rotation? When are the rotation blocks going to be? Because on one level, it's like, okay, yeah, it makes sense that they are going to keep printing V Maxes for a little bit, like, but. I don't want them to print them to the point where they would go over the typical rotation block schedule. Because that means that we will have V Maxes for another entire year, even if we don't want them. So
the one thing that you can be certain is that they're probably just going to be bad.
I mean, maybe. I don't know, though.
So it doesn't matter if they're in our block or not.
I was going to say, I don't know, because I do think it's interesting to print V, VMAX, and V-Star all in the same set of the same Pokemon. Because you think about it, Jake, what V-Star Pokemon do we have now where it would be competing with its VMAX counterpart, right? Like, what V-Star Pokemon even have VMAXs, right? We have Charizard.
I don't think any of them.
Charizard.
Oh, yeah, Charizard.
That's the only one. And nobody's going to play Charizard VMAX. Nobody. So, like...
Yeah, just Charizard.
So, like, it is interesting to, like, look at this and be like, huh, actually, like, when you build
Leafeon and Glaceon.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Leafeon and Glaceon also have VMAXs.
Yeah, because when Leafeon first came out, everyone's like, oh, Leafeon's going to be so much better because of the boss. And then we realized that Starbirth is just like really, really good.
Yes. Like the whole like Arceus stuff is too good. But I do think if the VMAXs are playable, right, it will be interesting to like, hey, you build a deck and like you're gonna put 4 of the Vs in because maybe you want like a 3-3 split of the VMAX or a 3-2 VMAX V-Star split or whatever, right? Like. That's kind of interesting gameplay, like a Pokemon that comes down and you actually don't know what it's going to evolve into as the opposing player. That's interesting gameplay. I like that.
I think that would actually be kind of cool too. That almost sounds like Digimon.
Right, like you have a thing and you don't know where it's going. Like you can maybe predict like, oh, it'll probably go into this or whatever. But I kind of like that. And that's honestly one of the reasons I did like the idea of Ditto V is because like it can be on the board and you don't know what it's going to turn into on the following turn. So it's like, do I assess it as a threat or not? I don't know.
Yeah, Ditto Prism Star was like one of my favorite cards.
It's good
because it was just it was so flexible and so fun, especially in Pidgeotto control.
Yes.
I will say another little piece. This is the free part. So if you're free 99 like me and you just love collecting things, the collectors need to go to their local hobby shops. There's a lot of good things that are coming in the market. This was posted on March 14th. So literally yesterday night. So this is almost brand new information, but the marketing kits of Brilliant Stars have come to hobby shops. Now hobby shops can order these marketing kits and they just give them out. It's meant for marketing of the Pokemon trading card game. And they're basically freebies that you can give out to fans, advertisements to display, things like that. Some stores give things a little bit differently. Like I know some stores, there are these like, when Evolving Skies came out, there was these big like holographic like posters.
Yeah, I
That
think there
like
still are.
if you turned to one side, it was like one evolution, and then you turned to the other side and it was another evolution, like that kind of thing. Like they gave away that and things like that. But the kits, if you do not know, they include a lenticular card, which I think is what I was talking about. That's what that's actually called, the lenticular card. A counter display, and some new things that have come up are mouse pads as well. So Brilliant Stars specific mouse pads. So very, very, very cool. Metallic counter display is 8x5x11, yada, 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 all that stuff. There are a bunch of other things like massive posters featuring 898 Pokemon released before Legends Arceus. So before those games, because with Legends Arceus, the count is at 905. It shows the regional forms on these posters and the mega evolutions. It's 57.5 inches by 27 inches. So that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, huge poster.
Sean, as well. There's 50 calendars that are actually stickers as well, 8x5x11, or basically your typical sheet of paper. And then the first 100 stickers as well are Charizard stickers, about 3x5, 3x5. So like stickers, calendar, everybody likes well, maybe not everybody likes calendars, but I really like calendars. I literally have 2 calendars in my office here. But Sean, you probably use a calendar.
I mean, on my phone. I don't actively use a paper calendar, Jake, but you know, I mean, it's cool. It's cool. I think for me, the thing that's really cool, honestly, the lenticulars, if you've been into some of your game stores lately, like one of the stores that I go to, Third Universe, they have a lenticular from the other set, like from the previous sets. And they're cool. And I know a lot of people who like collect a variety of Pokemon stuff, not just cards, but like other objects. These lenticular cards they are going to be, you know, somewhat rare relative to like cards and things, right? Because it's like it's a marketing material, and over time, things like these marketing materials, if you take good care of them, they can be worth a pretty penny. And they're cool. They're like big. They're like holographic, like you said. Like they're yeah, that's the one that I'd be most excited about. The mouse pads. The mouse pads are interesting, but you know what they look like? They look like the playmats that they gave away at Brisbane. So, like, to be honest, I'm just hoping that the playmats that they give away at the regionals upcoming are also the cool Arceus ones.
I will say I do not recommend getting the lenticular poster and like selling it immediately on eBay, like scalping it per se, but I will say, if you are a collector and you like having a lot of things in your collection and you want to wait on like buying one of these eventually someday, let me give you some of the prices that I'm seeing on eBay for these lenticulars and their sets. So I looked it up right now. The evolutions, or I'm sorry, no, yeah, the evolutions. Oh, Evolving Skies. That's what I meant. Evolving Skies. Evolutions is a completely different set, which is not in this conversation. Evolving Skies. That poster right now going for $450 on eBay. Chilling Rain, $250 on eBay. Battle Styles, $175. So like even Fusion Strike, $200. So like these are like, if you can get your hand on one of these and you want to frame it, like, you know, my recommendation is to get in now.
Yeah, well, and this one's got a Charizard. Don't discount that Charizard premium.
This one, a lot of, I mean, this is also like brand new stuff, so there's not a lot on the market. Those were going for between like $300 to $500.
Yeah. I mean, the price of this, who knows?
Because they were so new.
Yeah, the price of this, who knows? But I'm saying, like, because this is the one that's coming out.
Yes.
If you can get your hands, if you're friendly with your local game store, and they are not planning on keeping this, because, you know, it takes up space. This promotional material, if they're planning on ordering it but not keeping it, you know.
And it gets outdated, too.
Yeah. Yeah, you
So they
can
may
usually.
get this, they may get the Brilliant Star stuff and then be like, oh, okay, now we're going to give away our Evolving Skies stuff
Yeah.
type of
Yes.
deal. Or Fusion Strike.
So yeah, it's I don't know, cool stuff. Cool stuff.
I think it's very, very cool. But Sean, the meat and potatoes of this podcast, the the goodies. Sean, it's like Halloween all over again, getting all these goodies. The Brisbane Regionals happened last weekend over in Australia. 150 players, Sean. I think that this was like one of the biggest turnouts for an Australian event. I should have fact checked this before, but I remember people saying, I remember a lot of content creators saying, like on Twitch and stuff like that, as the event was going on, that like 150 is like really, really big for Australia. It may not seem that big for a lot of people, but Australia being a smaller country than the United States, and you know, you look at these results, not many travelers as well, because
That's true.
I don't think the country was closed off, but
I don't think it's closed off, but like, international travel
it
is still a
had
pain in the butt.
restrictions of sorts.
Also, traveling internationally to Australia is not cheap. It's not like, like any of the American or European players. I'm like, nobody's hopping on a plane to go to Australia,
Not this time around. Before, yes, pre-pandemic, but not
Maybe,
post-pandemic. Right now, but there was a lot of interesting stuff in here, Sean. But I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube or even on the video player on Spotify, if you're watching it that way, because that's a relatively newer feature, the top 16 is kind of one of two archetypes you're probably aware of. 7 of the decks in the top 16 were Mew Genesect, right? We know that deck is good. We know that deck isn't going anywhere. This didn't surprise me, at least. But what was nice, though, was that there were 6 Arceus decks alongside in the top 16. And when I say Arceus decks, Sean, I'm not just talking about one specific archetype of Arceus, not one specific build of 60 cards of Arceus. I'm talking about a variety of different Arceus deck lists and archetypes as well. Different ways to play Arceus V-Star in your deck. So, Sean, which deck do you want to go over first and talk about?
Well, the one thing I will say, looking at this, so we have 7 Mew. You said 6 Arceus, but really, I would call it 7, because the Suicune deck also plays 2 Arceus V-Star. So it's kind of 7 Arceus.
Yes. Yes. So it was basically a 7-7 even split. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
errata,
no. And then you got two Gengar VMAXs somehow sneaking in there, which I think was a bit of a surprise to some people. But I mean, Dark hitting for weakness against Mew, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Both of those Gengars didn't hit the top 8.
No,
they were
did not.
12th and 16th in terms of results. So I would say like I would be more surprised if it reached top 8. Like, I would agree with you if it did reach top 8, but because Mew is such a prevalent deck, right? Like, half of this top 16 is Mew, so you could assume that at least a third of the meta is probably Mew in terms of the overall tournament. It doesn't super surprise me.
Yeah. But I guess we could start. I mean, we could start with the winner if you want.
Okay.
Just, I mean,
Let's
so
go.
Mew VMAX taken first place. Natalie, I want to say Millar, is how you might pronounce the last name. But yeah, taking first
Natalie
place.
is a top player.
Yes.
Natalie is the top player. Like, Natalie was part of the tournament. Remember the top player tournament that Pokemon did before like the first Players Cup or whatever? Do you remember that?
Yes, yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, when they had the invitational.
She played a part of that. She's been around for a while. Like, she's a good player. Anyways, Sean, yes, looking at this deck list, there's one thing that you can make note of that is the most surprising to, I think, most people, and that is there are no basic psychic energies in this deck. And you may think, like, Jake, why would you need psychic energies? Because leading up to the event, a lot of people may have thought that you needed psychic energies to be Duraludon, right? Duraludon VMAX blocking anything with special energies. If you have a deck that's only special energies, how do you beat that, actually? But
Yeah.
we'll get into that in a second. But because of Double Turbo coming out in Brilliant Stars, Double Turbo Energy is just such a good card, right? You could just evolve a naked Mew VMAX, no energies on it, and then you can just attach the Double Turbo, and you can automatically be doing 190 from Genesec's, or copying Genesect V's Turbo or Technoblast, whatever that attack is called, and therefore knocking out opposing Mew Vs, knocking out opposing Genesect Vs, and because you've got power tablets and choice belts, you could basically guarantee from at least Technoblast knocking out a V, any V in the format, Arceus V with 220 HP, all of them, Sean.
And I mean, I will say it is. You wouldn't necessarily knock out a Duraludon V without a power tablet. But to your point, like if you draw through enough of your deck quickly enough before they can get into the Duraludon VMAX, I think that is this deck's game plan against Duraludon, especially because you are not playing the stadium that turns off abilities.
Pat to the peak. But what I will say is if they do VMAX, right, and you do have that ability standing in your way, remember that Mew has Max Miracle, Sean, the second attack on Mew, the one that people don't usually use because, well, they just want to blast away with Technoblast, but Mew has Max Miracle for 130 damage, 2 psychics, so basically that's just 2 fusion energies, which is not very hard for Mew players to get because Elisa Sparkle exists. But Max Miracle, if you do not know, 130 base damage. This attack's damage isn't affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon, so it's basically like Dragapult's attack where they can just hit through anything. Their Shred attack where they can just hit through anything and just hit that base 130. So you do that, and then you get your power tablets, your choice belt as well. And I mean, you can one-hit KO a Duraludon VMAX. Wait, can you?
No,
hold on,
not
120.
Because Duraludon has 330.
130. Oh, it's 280. But you can Max Miracle multiple turns in a row, right? And I don't think Duraludon, Arceus Duraludon, we'll look later. I don't think they're playing Cheryls, right? Because it's too much energy that you have to build up. So, I mean, if you could just get a couple, like, Mew VMAX with the choice belt, maybe like 2 tablets, Max Miracle, you could do that again, Max Miracle knockout. Like, you could just 2-shot them. I mean, it's a little bit slower of a game.
I mean, and I will say, like, in terms of this deck list, you are also playing, obviously, the Meloetta because it's broken.
We've learned since Azul started playing Turbo Meloetta that Meloetta is just really good. I think Gassy was a part of that, too.
Yeah, but you're also playing a one of Oricorio, which is interesting, taking 20 less damage for your Pokemon VMAX, which is useful. I think in a variety of different matchups, I guess the 20 damage makes sense. It's a one of, though, so I guess it's specific. What matchups would that be specific to, though, that you would want to throw that down?
Do that for the mirror match. Because I mentioned earlier how with Double Turbo, you can copy Genesec's attack for 190. So one of the things that you can do is you can make it to where with that Double Turbo, your opponent's actually hitting for 170 with Oricorio in play if they decide to boss up a Genesect or Mew or something, and they can't knock it out in one shot. And so, I mean, obviously it's not just that. There's several other matchups that you could do, like Arceus V-Star with its first attack that does 200 damage for 3 energies.
20.
I mean, it usually has a double turbo attached to that, so that's 180, and then Oricorio blocking that makes it 160. So, and that doesn't have really many damage modifiers. It might have a choice belt or whatever, but it might not have a damage modifier to be able to use and knock out these like little Vs that you have. So Oricorio, I mean, there's 2 matchups right there that were literally 14 of the 16 top spots of the of Brisbane. So like it's a valid tech card, Sean.
Yeah.
Also, Echoing Horn, I like that really, really well, especially Echoing Horn when you talk about the Mew mirror match, right? They want a lot of Genesects in play. They want a Mew V, a Mew VMAX, possibly a Meloetta or Oricorio. If you can disrupt that and put something in play that really doesn't need to be in play, like maybe you're one-shotting them really easily because you're a dark deck or something, or wait, no, hold on. This is me we're talking about that has the horn. Anyways, you can disrupt your opponent very, very well. Maybe they discarded a Crobat or a Luminion or something that doesn't need to be on the bench. You can just horn it right away, right back, etc., etc.
I think in the Duraludon matchup we were talking about earlier, right? They're going to have Duraludons, and then they're also going to have the Arceus Vs in the trash. So you could just maybe even ignore Duraludons entirely and take 3 knockouts if you can get, an early game V of some sort, probably a Duraludon V, maybe if you're lucky. Take out the Arceus V star that comes up because you don't have to worry about getting through for damage. And then, the third attack, you could just Echoing Horn one of those Vs back onto the field and boss it up for game.
I mean, it provides a lot of flexibility if you do get the opportunity to use it, because, there's a lot of discard stuff with the Ultra Ball and Quick Balls in this deck because, well, you want to draw cards. And maybe because you want to draw cards, you have to use it early on something that's not necessarily as effective. But either way, it's a really good option. And, a winning list, Sean, by a very, very good player, is pretty good. I think it's a pretty cool Mew list.
Mew VMAX, that was the one thing that we discussed when Arceus came out, was like, okay, well, where will Mew sit with regard to Arceus, right? Because we know Arceus is broken, we know Mew is broken, and it seems like right now it's literally split down the middle, the whole format, at least at Brisbane, which was like, in the top 8, there was 4 Mews, and there were 4 Arceus flavors, and that was it. And it was like, I guess we know what the top 1 and 2 decks are, and I would say in a lot of ways that Mew, because Mew is a singular deck, it probably sits alone in the tier 0 category, because it's like there's not like a lot of variations on it anymore. Like there's just like really one deck, a few cards swapped here and there.
There's just like a lot of tech cards that you can change.
Whereas Arceus, it's like, okay, what partner is the right partner for the meta? So I don't think Arceus is quite tier 0 yet, because I think that whatever it partners with, while flexible, is a bit of a meta call.
Arceus can make like any V or V Star or V Max good, right?
Yeah, I think that's the meme right now. Arceus plus bad V Max equals.
Yeah, I've been just so busy the last week that I haven't been able to go to watch like a lot of YouTube videos. Mm-hmm. But I would assume that Little Dark Fury, a lot of the lists lately have just been, no, I was going to say maybe a lot of the lists have been like Arceus V Star lists. Did do one with Stone Journer V Max, so shout out to LDF. But he's been creating some actually incredible different like baby Pokemon deck profiles. So shout out to him for not just riding the back of Arceus.
Jake, do you
LDF? I don't think we can go a week without mentioning him.
Jake, do you want to talk about second place? So we talked a lot about how does Mew get past Duraludon. Well, Duraludon was the second place deck.
So Duraludon VMAX, I think this is pretty similar to Riley's list at the Full Grip that won the Full Grip 2K. And for good reason. It is a good deck. It does a lot of good things with being able to power up that Duraludon VMAX, and Duraludon not having a weakness not having a factor, and you rarely ever get one shot. It does have the spicy single strike style mustard, which this plays 2 of. I think Riley only played 1 in his list. So having 2, maybe you found way more opportunities to get that Duraludon, bless you as well.
Thank you.
To get that Duraludon VMAX out, because, well, if at least the winning Mew list was playing Echoing Horn, I bet Natalie wasn't the only one playing an Echoing Horn in their list. So very, very cool. I will say on this. I will say as well that a lot of people had been playing around with what kind of stadiums you wanted to use. I believe some people were using training court. Some people were even using Pats of the Peak. Because Pats of the
Yeah.
Peak is just a good way to shut down Mew, VMAX, and Genesect decks.
Yeah.
So that's a valid opportunity of why you would play it, even though you shut off your own Starbirth and Skyscraper abilities on your Pokemon. So probably why this list doesn't play it. But what at least this person went to, I'm blanking on their name right now, Luis Pozzaccio. I probably botched that. They opted to play the Collapsed Stadium, the new card out of Brilliant Stars, which is pretty good right now, I'll say, Sean. Sean, do you want to read it in case somebody doesn't know here listening to this what Collapsed Stadium is?
Collapse Stadium, each player can't have more than 4 bench Pokemon. If a player has 5 or more, they discard bench Pokemon until they have 4. The player who played this card discards first. If more than one effect changes the number of bench Pokemon allowed, use the smaller number.
So we look at this card, and, you know, I talked about Pats of the Peak earlier being a way to stop Mew and Genesect from drawing cards. This is also a way to stop them because you could have them get rid of a Genesect V. And if you remember, Sean, to the last list, this Duraludon Arceus list plays 4 Collapsed Stadiums. You remember back to the Mew list that Natalie Miller played, there were only 2 stadiums in there.
Yep.
Only 2 stadiums. So you have a good shot at getting your Collapsed Stadium to stick and be in there for the entire game and for the series when you're playing best of 3. Because remember, regional tournaments, best of 3, Sean. No best of 1 shenanigans.
Yeah, I think that's another thing. I mean, we'll get into Salt Lake City prep in a little bit, but yeah, best of 3 does change the mentality going into a tournament. And I don't know, I guess that might be a big shift for a lot of people who have played only online tournaments where it's all best of 1. Because, like, you have the opportunity if you have a bad game, like, okay, but if the deck is well built and you know how to pilot it, you might be able to, you can feel confident that you can come back from a first game loss.
Yeah. And so this deck, aside from that, doesn't have too many things that are different or new from the list that Riley had. You know, the 4-2 Arceus V and V Star, because you pretty much always want to start Arceus V, because moving that Duraludon V out of the active is a real big pain when you're trying to Trinity Nova on Arceus's V Star's attack. So I kind of like that this list didn't change too much. Obviously it'll evolve and it'll probably change a little bit more, but I mean, this just goes to show the amount of time that, like, Riley and the different people that Riley tested with this archetype to make it to pretty much, I mean, the same thing as of right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think your point, the one thing that I would say, if you're planning on playing against some of these top tier decks, there's only 2 switches and 1 escape rope. Now, I mean, if the meta doesn't really require switches and escape ropes, then whatever, that's fair. But I do think that that is one potential weakness that you are starting to see. And the reason that, you know, maybe a Durant deck might be a good meta call if you feel, because, you know, all of these decks, I think it'd be interesting to, like, every time we look at a new deck from Brisbane to say how many switching outs are there? Because once you run out of your switching outs, especially if you're like Mew VMAX, who all you have is like double turbo and fusion strike energy, do you really want to be attaching to discard to switch out? No. I don't know. I think that, you know, that's the only thing. The one of Evolution Incense also kind of funny in the deck.
Well, I mean, it's so important to try to find, you know, not only your Arceus V-Star, so then you can Starbirth literally immediately, but also your Duraludon VMAX, because, like, your Duraludon V is not necessarily protected. It's viable to be knocked out by mostly anything in the format at this point.
Yeah.
So you got to get to the big beefy boy as soon as you can.
It's just so funny. Like 4 Ultra Balls and 1 Evolution Instant, just 1, and I'm like,
And then 2 mustards as well.
yeah, I had 2 mustards. I'm like, okay, fair enough. I mean, I personally think like you could. I don't know if that 1 Evolution Incense is like
You
making the
could
deck
probably
playable.
take that out for a tech card, whatever
Yeah.
that may be. I don't actually have like a good idea of what that tech card could be though.
I mean, you could throw in another choice belt, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know, cause like you usually have your like big charms, right?
Yeah, there's
I
2.
mean,
That's fair.
having the
Yeah.
like I feel like your choice belt goes to the Arceus,
Yes.
which is okay being a one of because you have Starbirth. Starbirth usually gets you the one
That's
of
true.
your last 2 pieces or whatever that you need to complete the puzzle of your turn 2.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you really need a second choice belt unless the math that Duraludon hits needs to be beefed up for whatever reason. I mean, it's doing 240 or I'm sorry, 220
Which
pace,
is like,
so you'd only be going up to 250 and that I mean
yeah,
that doesn't reach a V-star like Arceus of 280. So I
That's
don't know
fair.
if you need another one.
that's fair. Yeah, maybe you don't. Yeah, interesting. It's just the one of an Evolution Incense of all cards caught my eye. I'm like, you've got 4 Ultra Balls. Is the one of necessary?
One of cards are great, and that's why expanded is so wacky. Because
Yes.
expanded is like literally one ofs, especially when you talk about your draw supporters.
Let's see here. So I think the Mew decks, I don't think we need to cover the rest of them. I mean, like we said, there's 7 of them in the top 16. But in terms of other Arceus decks, there's the one Duraludon. We can quickly look at this one, Arceus, Inteleon, Moltres. So
This is kind of a mix of 2 decks. So one we'll get into later of like Arceus counter box, but the one that I think a lot of people will recognize first is like the Dark Dudes deck, or your little baby attackers that hit with Sableye V. So the Inteleon engine in this deck, Sean, we've seen this, we've talked about this with your Hoopa baby Moltres with the Malevolent Charge, right, of accelerating those energies. But now with the addition of Arceus V-Star and Galarian Moltres V. Moltres V, I think, is so the thing about the Galarian Moltres V in comparison to the Galarian Moltres baby is with the baby, right, you need to be able to have the energies in your hand at one time, and you also need for there to be enough prizes out on the field. Even to knock out a Mew VMAX, you have to give up at least a couple prizes.
Yeah.
So with the Galarian Moltres V, that could be used as kind of an earlier game attacker, right? Because it's just that base 190.
Yeah.
And so at any time, it takes a little bit more than your Moltres. You can't just like surprise Moltres and attack because the 3 energies you have to use the
you could
the wing wings ability. Oh, wings ability Raihan attach. Yes.
There you go.
You could use the one of Raihan in there. I'm sorry, I didn't see the Raihan at first.
Yeah.
You can use the one of Raihan, so you can actually throw this down and attack in the turn. Which is probably why it's a one of, because it's a little bit harder to do, but it could really swing you early game, in my opinion. And that's like what it's more used for, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think for me that one of, it's always a little weird when you have a one of supporter, but you're not playing the Luminion to like go get it, because like it does feel like if you're, I don't know, like to me I would almost play the Luminion too if you're playing a one of Raihan, but
Starbirth is your Luminion.
I mean, yeah, that's true. That's a
better.
very good point. That's it, man. I keep forgetting. I don't know how, but yeah, Starbirth is perfect for that. Okay, but
And so again, you have your Arceus V and V-Star, like we just mentioned with Starbirth. Also Trinity Nova, if you want. I mean, I don't know if it's super into Trinity Nova because you're only playing 2 double turbo energies, but it is an option out there if you would like. So also opting to play a one of a water energy. I think this is mainly for Aqua Bullet,
Yeah.
on the Inteleon, the Shady Dealings Inteleon, because Aqua Bullet, if you don't know, is a 120 active, 20 on the bench. And we're not seeing a lot of Mew decks right now, especially in this top 16. So if you whack something, because this deck is a little bit slower and makes the game a little bit slower, if you whack something and it only has a little bit of HP left, Aqua Bullet could finish the job for you, Sean.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like you said, like you could pop something with Trinity Nova for like, 200, something around there, right? Maybe
200, 180,
yeah, something small.
210,
Like
230.
imagine bopping a little. Actually, if you bop a Genesect for not 200 but 180 because of the double turbo, right? So you have a 10 HP Genesect sitting in the back probably. And then yeah, you just kind of sneakily come up with an Aqua Bullet 20 to the bench, getting 2 prizes there. If that 120 finishes off something else, you could be taking 5 prizes off one little Aqua Bullet, and you're like, okay, actually, it's not terrible.
You feel really good, especially because you have 2 Claras in this list as well to be able to get the Sobble, Drizzile, and Inteleon back, so then you can Shady Dealings more in future turns later in the game, because Clara, if you do not know, is a supporter. You choose one or both, grabbing 2 Pokemon from your discard pile, putting them in your hand, and or 2 energies, basic energies. I believe it's basic energies, yes. Basic energies, and putting them back into your hand. So a lot of flexibility with this deck, and having 2 Claras, you're probably going to use it at least once in the game. But I mean, people love this deck. I'm sure. I mean, the Galarian Weezing going away, Sean, and the Sableye V going away is a little bit sad. It felt a little bit more pure to the like, I don't want to say rogue deck, because I think this deck is better than rogue and the archetype is better than rogue, but like kind of like your counter meta type thing.
I mean,
your beat up Mew
I
deck.
guess the benefit of this deck is it still beats up Mew, right? Like the Weezing and the Sableye, they beat up Mew, but they're kind of like slow beat up Mew. Do you know what I mean? Like, whereas these, like, they can power themselves up when they come into play. They do plenty of damage to take the one-hit KOs against Mew VMAX. So you're basically fine for the most part. So it did feel like you're just sort of cutting the chaff if you really think that Mew VMAX is your main opponent. Mm-hmm. Like, because if you're not playing against Mew VMAX, then it's just Arceus and Teleon, which, like,
is a deck that we can even talk about later, because it also made top 8.
I mean, do you want to go into what an Arceus and Teleon straight deck is?
We will. So this is Mitch Kanucky, the Sableye member that we were talking about earlier. So big shout outs to them for getting top 8 at the first regional back. They were piloting Arceus v Inteleon. So this is a combination of Shady Dealings Inteleon and Quick Shooting Inteleon. The whole Shady Dealings line. We've talked about that many of times. And we've also talked about many times how good Arceus V-Star is with not only the Trinity Nova attack. We've talked about that many times. 200 base damage for 3 colorless energy, accelerate 3 energies to, is it just Pokemon V? Yeah, to your Pokemon V in any way you'd like. So you could do that to another V-Star, another V, etc., etc. And then also Starbirth. Just your V-Star power as an ability, grab 2 cards out of your deck. Any cards, doesn't matter. It's just, there's so many different things that you can grab. And so this list is quite interesting. I do want to notion the Zigzagoon. Yeah. Sean, do you remember which podcast talked about, I think this was maybe 2 podcasts ago, how cool it would be to put a Zigzagoon and a couple scoop up nets in your Arceus list to counter the mirror match? Do you remember what podcast mentioned that, Sean?
I mean, I assume it was our podcast.
It was us. Now, I'm not saying, I'm sure we were not the only people that thought of this, but I do like, Sean, that when we like catch on to trends and stuff like this, and it's like the future sight, but by accident, because we haven't really done a future sight in a while.
It's true.
But anyway, so moving on and continuing on this list, The Dunsparce is here as well. The Dunsparce, if you do not know what that tech card is, it is a basic Pokemon with 60 HP. So it is searchable with Level Ball because you are using the Shady Dealings engine. So you're naturally playing Level Balls anyway. But it has the ability that your normal Pokemon in play do not have a weakness.
Colorless
Well,
Pokemon.
Pokemon in play don't have a weakness. And so really this was just to counter like Urshifus.
Yeah.
We've really seen Urshifus drop off as of late. So I think maybe at this point, if you want to pick up this list, you could probably take out this Dunsparce.
I don't know.
In my opinion.
Well, I don't know. Actually, the reason I don't think that I would take out the Dunsparce is because you don't want to like come up against one matchup that's playing Galarian. Like, think about it. Arceus Counterbox is a thing too, and Galarian Zapdos.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So like the whole idea of this deck, in some ways, like yes, you're doing pretty decent damage pretty quickly. You're scattering around a bunch of damage counters between the quick shooting and the Zigzagoon. And the idea is, I think that you're taking extra prizes on off turns where you're like with damage counters effectively. But alongside that, you have to make sure that your V-Stars are beefy enough not to get OHKO'd. That's really the goal. So Arceus is 280. If you have the Dunsparce and you don't have weakness, then it's just a flat 280, which is, you know, other than Mew VMAX, hard to reach up to. And then you're also playing 2 big charms. So now it's a 310 HP. And that's going to be real hard to do more than once in a game for any deck. And then on top of that, you're also playing a 1 of Sharon's Care, which allows you to put one of your colorless Pokemon in play into your hand, and then you remove all the... It's like, you know, an Acerola, for those of you who know that.
It's an Acerola or AZ, except you don't need the damage counters, and it has to be a normal Pokemon.
So I think that that is kind of the way that you want to also think about this list, is it's like kind of a mini tank engine, where it's like, I'm going to make this Arceus annoying enough to kill, and then when you get close, I'm going to Sharon's Carrot, and they're even running a Palpad in the deck. So you can, if you Sharon's Care early and just have it natural, you can Palpad it back in and then use the Starbirth ability later to get another one, to get that one right back out, which is, it can be wild.
This also has the 1 of Judge, which I find to be very interesting. Judge, if you do not know, it's a card that's been around for a long time in the Pokemon trading card game. Got reprinted in Fusion Strike, I think it is.
I think so.
Both players shuffle their hand into their deck and draw 4 cards. Especially when you have a deck like Arceus that has the Starbirth ability. You know, we've seen Marnie. We saw Let Loose Marshadow for a long time before that got banned. Just limiting your opponent's hand to 4 cards, whether that's early game or late game. You know, the late game N, you know, in the previous standard metas was always super powerful. It's that same concept, especially when you have Arceus V-Star that can allow you to go get whatever you want.
I also think, I wonder if Mitch here was, because like you could put 2 Marnies in and it almost has the same effect of like your opponent still only draws 4. The difference, and you draw 1 less card. So you might think on the surface, oh, isn't this just worse Marnie? But in reality, Judge has you shuffle the cards in, whereas Marnie has you put them to the bottom. So if you have cards in your hand that you would like to see again at some point, like the potential, right? Judge is probably a better card because it is less punishing for you than Marnie might be. Now, obviously, if your opponent has like there are only 2 bosses left in deck in their hand, and you can Marnie them to the bottom, that's great. But like, how often is that going to happen?
It's quite interesting. You also play 3 Paths to the Peak as well to shut off different abilities like Genesect and stuff. And especially if you are the first one to use your V-Star ability, if you're doing an Arceus Mirror match, you can shut off the opponent's Arceus V-Star.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I do like that. Also, you kind of need it for Duraludon because I'm looking at this and I'm like, if you do not have a way to turn off Duraludon, there's actually no way around it in this list. So, yeah, it's a cool list. It's a cool list. I mean, not that Arceus is cheap, but like if you've been playing for a couple years now, you likely have all the other cards already.
Hmm.
So all you got to do is pick up a couple of Arceus, which, not cheap again, but like there's less footwork involved in this deck for people who've been playing for a year or so.
Anyway, Sean, are there any other decks that you want to mention? I think there was one archetype in top 8 that we didn't really touch over.
Was it the Suicune version, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, I mean, for this one, it's pretty straightforward. Think of it exactly like the list we just talked about. In many ways, it's Arceus and Teleon. The only difference here is that you're also running a 3 of Suicune V. For those of you who don't know, Suicune V, a water and colorless, 20 plus. 20 plus 20 more for each bench Pokemon, yours and your opponent. So it maxes out typically at about 220. So 220 damage is not bad for 2 energy, and you can play that Melanie engine really puts in work. You can play those Cape of Toughness as well on the Suicune to make them 260 HP, which is not nothing.
Then you also have the flexibility of like things like Choice Belt or even Jewel Jammer is teched in this list to be able to modify damage or hinder your opponent from doing specific things that they want to do. And I mean, we saw a dip in Suicune once Evolving Skies came out, or I'm sorry, not Evolving Skies, Fusion Strike. When Fusion Strike came out, Mew became so dominant, we did see a dip in Suicune, but now, who knows, maybe we see Suicune a little bit on the upcline, upcline, I think it's just incline. Which is kind of interesting because before, before Brilliant Stars, it was just decks that filled the bench. So like in my thought, like Suicune made more sense, but Jolteon was just so powerful before in the Fusion Strike meta as well that I mean just Suicune will just lose instantly to a Jolteon deck. And so now even with decks like Duraludon Arceus that have minimal bench space, it's kind of surprising that there's no like Echoing Horn in here.
I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I think Echoing Horn, that might be something if you're considering this list, like a one of Echoing Horn, because you can go get it with Starbirth, right? So
you can get it with Starbirth or Shady Dealings.
Yeah. And so this list is interesting. I think, in my honest opinion, I think that Suicune V is typically not big enough to withstand being one-hit KO'd. It's still giving up 2 prizes. And I worry that it's very you can play around it a lot in this format because like especially like if one of the other top decks that people are gonna play is Duraludon VMAX Arceus does not need to bench a lot of Pokemon.
Yeah.
And so it can just sit here and be like, I'll happily have 2 Duraludon on the bench or a Duraludon and an Arceus V-Star on the bench, one thing in the active, and you're not going to get a lot from me.
Yeah, like, okay, that's fine if you have to 3-shot me.
Right, and it's like, you have to 3-shot me, and you have to do it with something you haven't attached any colorless, any, like, special energy to, which is fine with Suicune, but it's still annoying.
It does make it more difficult.
Yeah. So that's definitely one where I'm like, okay, I could see this having some good matchups and some weird ones. Some awkward.
You also are playing 4 Path to the Peak as well, so at least in terms of Duraludon's ability, like true. There you go, you can shut it off for a little bit. But with their 4 collapsed stadiums, it might be tough to be able to immediately win the war, but you'll probably win the stadium war, at least make sure there are no stadiums in play because they're playing the one of Pumpkaboo.
Yeah.
You forget what Pumpkaboo is. It's Pokemon that takes away the stadium. You can discard the stadium, and I believe this Pokemon gets knocked out.
No.
Or put in the discard pile.
No, it's just when you play this Pokemon from your hand, discard a stadium.
I'm thinking of the old Marshadow. The Marshadow you had to discard when you discarded the stadium. Yeah, this one is just you put it down and then the stadium goes away.
Yeah,
so
and it's nice because actually if you're playing against an opposing player who plays a Path to the Peak, before you're able to Starbirth, then this is searchable via like your level balls, your quick balls, whatever. So you could just go grab this as your effective stadium removal and just throw it on the bench, get rid of the stadium, do what you need.
Yes, because reminder, Shady Dealing still works under Path to the Peak because Shady Dealings Inteleon is not a rule box Pokemon.
Yes, indeed.
Sean. But Sean, is there anything else you want to talk about from Brisbane?
I will say Brisbane. One of our listeners. Yes, one of our listeners on YouTube, I think, was like, you pronounce it Brisbane. So I will say Brisbane in the correct sense. Thank you.
Not very good at pronunciation,
but
of anything really.
But yeah, I don't think
Arceus or Arceus.
I don't know. I think
I'm pretty sure it's Arceus right now because the Pokemon Company. If there's one thing that I know about this, like little tidbit, is that Arceus has had its name changed officially a couple times. Like it used to be Arceus. Then eventually one day they started saying Arceus. But I will call it Arceus.
Well, Jake, I wanted to say there's we're not going to get too deep into Salt Lake City because I like I think you said we I believe did something with Celios with Luke not that long ago talking about prepping for a big regional. So what I will say though,
video is still relevant.
Yeah, still relevant. Obviously, we expect to see a lot of Mew VMAX, a lot of the current Arceus lists probably show up. But I want to do a quick little future sight at the end of this pod, Jake. What is one deck that you didn't see in this top 16 that you think will make a good showing at Salt Lake City? If you want, I will go first, if you would like.
Yeah, because I may have a hot take for Salt Lake.
Okay. The one that I will do first, which... This is really going out on a limb here. But I think I saw somebody tweet Arceus Gardevoir VMAX the other day. And I don't hate it. I
saw that too.
I don't hate it because my friend played Gardevoir VMAX. It tends to play a lot like Gardevoir Sylveon back in the tag team era. You have a lot of cards that can heal the Gardevoir. It heals itself 30 damage each time it hits. So that's one thing. And then you have all of the healing potion cards. You can play other healing cards in it as well if you wanted.
Lucky Ice Pop hit 10 heads.
Yeah. But like, I think a deck like that, where it's like it's a big beefy thing, it's weak to metal. So what metal decks are out there right now?
Genesect.
Yeah, but like, are you going to be attacking?
It's not a metal deck, but Genesect.
Yeah, Genesect is metal, but like, I guess they could attack with Genesect. You could, if you want to commit 2 Fusion Strike energies to your dang Genesect.
You have 4 Fusion Strike energies in the deck. All you got to do is just release the Sparkle twice.
That's true.
Then just attach the double turbo, and I'm pretty sure you still knock out.
Yeah, it's quite a commitment. In which case, I'm like, okay, fair. If you really want to go for it, maybe it's worth it. Maybe. I don't know. That's one deck that I'm like, maybe there's a world in which that does well. But Jake, what's your...
I don't think that Salt Lake City is going to be much different from Brisbane. Or Brisbane?
Yeah, Brisbane.
I don't think it's going to be much different. I'm going to be honest. I think Mew is... I'm not going to say that our lists are super refined or that things aren't eventually going to change, but like, in my personal opinion, 1 week is not going to change much from the results. Like, I think Mew is still going to be half of the top 8. I still think we'll probably have, I'll say, 2 different Arceus decks within the top 8. Like, I think maybe just 2 this time around. Now that we have seen Arceus in official tournaments and, you know, because it's kind of its first showing, we kind of know the different things that can come out of it. And so like Mew players will tech against some of those different things, you know? So not saying that there won't be a surprise deck. I hope that there's a surprise deck. Because if you saw me on Twitter, you know that I didn't enjoy this top 8 from this regional. You know that I didn't like it. So like, I hope it changes. I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't think that it'll change too much. I think at least half of it's going to be Mew VMAX, and
The
know,
other
there's
half
going
is going to be Arceus.
decks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say it's surprising to me. I think for a long time, Pokemon, there's always been like, the really good deck, and that deck might be expensive. But otherwise, there's like a bunch of other decks in there that, because of the various products that Pokemon has printed, are relatively cheap. This is the first time that I'm like, if you really are planning to win, like do well at one of these regionals, all of these decks, man, they're expensive. Because you got to buy the Mews. I mean, for Pokemon, they're expensive. They're not expensive if you're a Yu-Gi-Oh player or whatever. But like for a Pokemon player, you got to buy the Mews and the Mew VMAXs, or the Arceus and the Arceus V-Stars, and like, this actually might be the most expensive top tier format we've had in the last 2 years as well.
Trying to think of like Arceus or ADP Zacian.
But maybe when it very first came out, but like when it first came out, the other best deck was Chinchino Mill, which was cheap.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So it's like, and by the time that Chinchino Mill wasn't as popular, they had printed the League Battle decks to make ADP cheap. So it's like, I just think it's one other minor note. If you're getting into the game and buying singles for the first time, you've come in at an expensive moment where the top decks just happen to be kind of pricey. But
and even when we talked about like 4 months ago or so, like, oh, you should buy cards now, like before they spike up, like that couldn't even save you, because the top decks right now are like new. From the last 2 sets. Yeah, they're just new sets. So
yeah,
unfortunate, but that's just how it goes. If you're gonna play a card game, you got to put some money into it. Sean, is there anything else you want to mention before we end this pod?
No, Jake, take us away.
I will say before we go, there is another Pokemon podcast that has just started up, Pokemon TCG podcast. I think it's just, us, the Metapod. We love sharing the love, mentioning the other podcasts out there, the people that put in the hard work to cover the game. Azul, GG, and Trainer Chip actually made a podcast. Their first episode actually aired today. It's called Uncommon Energy. And so they come out on Tuesdays as well. So, Sean, we got some Tuesday buds over here. And so listen to us, and then right after, go listen to, or whatever order you want.
Whatever order you like. But yeah, Trader Chip and Azul, like, big shout out to them. They awesome content creators, also great players. So,
yeah, like especially the competitive side. I don't know how much though. They also don't want to be specifically limited, I believe, to the Pokemon trading card game. Like they want to talk about other things as well. So I mean, that's just what Azul was saying. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but anyways, thank you so much for listening to the Metapod podcast, the Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. Sean, you have a great rest of the day, and so do you, fabulous listeners.